Just listen.
Hey, welcome to Horse Sense Radio. We're making sense out of horses and talking with people that change the world. And I'm your host, Christine Rolando. I'm the CEO of Signet Equine Appraisals for more than 40 years. That's right, 40 years. I've been loving horses since I'm 5, maybe beyond, or maybe before. But we invite you to join us today and learn about horses. And as I said, people that make a difference in the world. And oh yeah, people that change the world. Today, I have a very special guest with us, Dr. Heather O'Leary. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Hey, Dr. Heather, how are you?
Hi, Christine. I'm great. How are you?
Well, I am so grateful that you and I were able to find our way through technology because I don't think either one of us have the gift of, what do I say? I think our energy fields are pretty high and we always somehow have a disconnect, at least I do, when it comes to sometimes the technology piece.
Yeah, I feel that.
You're laughing because, our listeners don't know this, but you and I are in two different places. We're both in New York, but, technology, as we've had this virus and we've all had to learn new senses of technology, it's not always easy. So we appreciate you guys listening to us wherever you are. And as I said, we are talking with Dr. Heather O'Leary, and she's going to share with us a little bit about her practice as a veterinarian and her love that she has for horses and animals. But before we get started, I always give a tip, and this tip is from Macaulay Topash, and many of our listeners know that you've been able to follow her on therootedjourney.com. That's therootedjourney.com, and lots of great tips and samples there. However, she has a new website, Macaulay Topash. That's right, Macaulay Topash, TAWPASH.com. Check it out. Her tip of the day today is benefits of a cold shower in the morning. Ooh, on a brisk day, I don't know how well you want to jump into that. But it does help with inflammation of muscle soreness, and it helps to speed up your metabolism. Also, it can help to boost the immune system. Hey, you start with a simple 30-second shower, normal shower. This is what I do. She gave me this tip a while ago, and I do it every day, and it had to do with my hair, Dr. Heather, because my hair was really, really dry, and I said, hey, what can I do? I'm trying everything. So she said, after you shampoo your hair, what you can do is turn the water on really cold and let that cold water go on your head. Oh, my goodness, that was a challenge. However, it's good for your body as well. So try it. So let's see if we can all boost our immune system and turn on that cold water for a little bit. And when it does, it seals that, it seals your hair, the follicles of your hair, but it also helps to boost your immune system. But with that said, check out MacaulayTopash.com and let's get right to it. Today's guest, Dr. Heather O'Leary. I'm so excited to have you with us today. Tell our listeners where you're calling from, and let's just get started a little bit about your journey. How's that?
That sounds great. I'm here in New York, in the Hudson Valley, Ulster County, in the Catskill Mountains, and I love it out here. How I started my horse journey. I think my parents, who are 80 years old now, are still scratching their head and wondering when my horse phase is going to pass. We never really did figure out where my love of horses came from. I feel like I was born with it. We've looked back. I have my last name's O'Leary, so obviously I have an Irish background. Got to have a few horse people back there. But like I said, it's really a mystery. I would just always drag my parents at any opportunity over to the pony rides. Remember those? I'm old enough to be at those old fairs, and they'd have the ponies with the pony rides. And that's where I wanted to be all the time. I didn't care about the cotton candy. I didn't care about the rides. I just wanted to be there with the ponies, riding them, petting them, giving them carrots, and just loving on them. So I don't know if anybody out here can relate to that.
Hey, I can relate to that because my first thing too, I grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey. No horses, but we had Bergen County, the little country park. I used to ride my bicycle, and same thing. I like walked the ponies for 8 hours just so I could get a 20-minute ride. So I'm with you, Heather.
Yep. That I grew up in central New Jersey, and not a ton of horses there, but I'm pretty crafty and I'm pretty inventive, and I'm also pretty persuasive. So I kept at it with my parents until little by little they helped me to kind of satisfy my horse fix. I remember a woman, and I don't know where everybody here is from when they're listening, but there was a woman in New Jersey when I was a little kid, and her name was Edna Klimek. And actually, I really want to say that name, Edna Klimek, because she has probably passed away by now, but she taught me such great horsemanship. I was a little kid. She had the patience of a saint. I thought she was the bravest and most wonderful person in the world. And if it wasn't for Edna Klimek, I might not have been where I am today. So,
Well,
if
I encourage our listeners to think about that person because every time I do interview somebody, that's what I ask. I know there's always somebody somewhere. So this Edna Klimek, she inspired you, and she was the one that really helped you. But keep going. I like to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Edna Klimek, she just, she taught me the basics of horsemanship there in Cranford, New Jersey. She had a tiny little farm on the south side of town. It's long since become developments, unfortunately, but, nothing shiny, nothing fancy, but just, a solid love of horses and a respect for them, and how to really move around them. And, that translated. I then went to Watchung Stables, which was a county run facility, and I learned how to ride horses there in group lessons. And, my passion continued. I wound up eventually teaching a little bit on weekends and summers. We had some really, really good times. And eventually I went to vet school. And when I went to vet school, I thought I probably wanted to be a horse vet, but I wanted to keep an open mind, and because there's lots of different ways to use a vet degree. And I kept thinking about it, and I kept trying to leave that open mind. But you know what? The horses kept calling to me. So certainly by the end of my second year, halfway through school, I knew for sure and for certain that I needed to work with horses as a life goal. And I got my first horse, actually, that was mine when I was in vet school, which makes no sense at all, of course, because I'm in vet school, I'm busy, and I'm, taking out loans to pay for my education. But the horse people out there who are listening, I hope you'll all understand things with horses don't always make sense, right?
Well,
Sometimes
that's why
you
the
just got to
show's
go with
called
it.
Horse Sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. You graduated from Cornell Vet School in 1999, and that's when you got your first horse in vet school. How interesting. Tell
In
us
vet
about
school.
that horse.
Oh, her name was Vita, and she was a standardbred. I was working at the high-speed treadmill because I needed to work, nights and weekends to help finance my education, but also for my brain. I need to do things. I can't just sit in front of books. I need to be able to put things into work. So there I was at the treadmill, and there was this leggy blood bay filly. It was like March when she came. She had been turned out. She was like a woolly mammoth. And so I just set to shedding her out with the shedding blade and teaching her how to use the treadmill. And she had some bumps along the road. It turned out that she had equine polysaccharide storage myopathy, which back then, 25 years ago, that was still a pretty new and unknown disease. There's a lot more known about it now. And turns out that mare had that.
What is
And we
that?
figured it
Tell
out.
our listeners what that is in a short version.
It means that her muscles did not know how to use energy from sugar properly. And that seemed like a really insurmountable problem back then. But there was a veterinarian named Beth Valentine who was studying that condition when I was a student at Cornell. And she figured out that if we switched them to a high fat diet, their muscle cells could get energy from fat instead of from sugar. So that's still the strategy for working with these horses these days. Although now we found out that there's a couple of different kinds of polysaccharide storage myopathy. So we won't get deep into the weeds on medical conditions, but there's always something to learn with horses, always something to learn.
Well, that's for sure. So, all right, let's fast forward now. You're at Cornell, you're graduating, and now you've also gone into some specialties, which I am so excited about because you are also certified veterinary spinal manipulative therapist, and you do acupuncture. So let's go back. Now you're graduating. Now what? Where do you go?
Well, now I'm graduating, and I felt like I got a really great education and I could go straight into general practice, but I'm always looking for more information. And I was able to get a really good internship at a hospital called Rood and Riddle Equine Hospital, and that was down in Lexington, Kentucky. That's a horse mecca, isn't it? Lexington, Kentucky. So down I went. I packed up me and Vita, and somehow by hook or by crook, we got ourselves down there, and I found a really great field that she could live in happily, and I could check on her in between all of my duties as an intern. And I learned all about surgery and running anesthesia and internal medicine. And man, in that 1 year internship, I think I learned as much as most people do in 5 or 10 years of general practice, because it was a really concentrated education.
Well, just so our listeners know, Root and Riddle is by far an unbelievable, like you said, a mecca of not only veterinary medicine in the equine world, but they have grown tremendously. I've watched them through the years. My career started in 1980, and they were, I believe they were starting the clinic back then. Riddle, I think Bill Root, right? Didn't he start the practice? And then the partner joined. So these are two really amazing people, and the staff, my goodness, the staff has grown tremendously. So you were there for an internship for a year. Share with our listeners, if you can, there's got to be one thing that maybe stands out. I mean, there's got to be a gazillion things, but maybe one thing you took away from that when you left there or when you were there learning.
Well, I'll tell you what, the most valuable thing I think that I learned was how to keep my head in an emergency. The veterinarians and the staff who I worked with there and who trained us as interns, they never lost their minds. They never lost their cool. Not that they were cocky, but they just always had a plan, and you followed the plan. And then when you deviated from the plan, you knew why, and you had plan A and B and all the way down to Z, and you just kept your cool. And that kind of exposure to so many different conditions, and them sharing their thought processes and how they approached it, that never left me. So even now, doing what I do now, which is quite different, I still use what they taught me there. I use that grounding of just piecing through and treating every animal that I approach, treating it like a puzzle to be solved and the animal to be helped, and never getting angry and never getting sad, and just never losing your cool, because the animals need us.
Never getting sad. That's got to be a tough one. I can't even watch the animals on the movies now. When a movie scene comes, I have to get up and leave with the animals. But, it's not easy to be a veterinarian. The road to your education is so long and arduous. People, I don't think they realize what it takes, the practice. Like you have your own practice now, which we're going to go more into it. But just the study alone, how many years were you actually in school?
Well, I got a bachelor's degree, so that took me 4 years. Some people can do it in a little less, but that took me the standard 4 years. And then vet school is another 4 years. And there's not really any way to do vet school in this country in less than that. So you got 8 years minimum. And I did have to take a little extra schooling to get some of the prerequisite courses done. But we'll still just say that was 8 years. And then I could have gone out and practiced, like I said, but I chose to tack on to my education that year-long internship. So that could count as 9 years of formal education. But what I tell people, when I see a young person who's interested in becoming a veterinarian, I tell them, you have to be good at school, because if you don't get good grades, they're not going to give you a chance to be a veterinarian. And we could have a whole other conversation about whether that's fair or not, but that's the way it is. But you have to not only be good at school, you really have to like it, because this is a profession where you never stop learning. And, in a formal way, we're required to get continuing education to maintain our license, but it can't just be about doing what's required, because every patient that walks in presents their own unique challenge. So you really have to love learning and figuring things out. And if you don't, that's okay. There's probably some other areas that you can go into, although gosh, when it comes to horses, I can't imagine any area where you're not always learning.
Always learning. Yeah, horses are good teachers as well. And one thing I think, a medical professional with humans, the human can speak back to them in words, but horses have to speak, or animals speak in a different language, not words, but body language. Or I have my little experience this past week. I knew there was something wrong. I have a little Shih Tzu, and I knew there was something wrong with her. My husband's like, she's fine. I said, no, there's definitely something wrong. I could tell, look in her eyes, and sure enough, she had to go to the veterinarian, and she, she's on meds now, and she had an issue going on with her. But, I could see it initially just by looking at her little face. So I think you, as a professional veterinarian, you have that gift. You have that, it's the science. Like you said, you go through all of the, you tackle everything with the approach of you have to figure it out from a scientific way. But you, Heather, I know, although I've never met you personally, I've talked to you, I know that you have that special gift, that special love that translates into your practice. And let's tell our listeners where your practice is located and what things you do at your practice.
Well, I'm based, as I said, in the Hudson Valley in Ulster County. Kind of between Kingston and Woodstock, and I've got a little office right here tucked in the Catskills that where I'll see my small animal patients. Because right now I say any species considered, because I've got a lot of different strategies in my toolkit to help an animal. Most people bring me dogs, a few cats to my office, and then I travel quite far and wide to see horses and do what I do. It's no longer a practice where I do conventional veterinary work. When you need your vaccines and your x-rays and your dental floats, you need to go to a regular vet or another professional who provides those services. I limit my practice to acupuncture, chiropractic, diet and nutritional therapy. I have some different, what I call electroceuticals, PEMF therapy and cold laser. And gosh, I've got a tuning fork and magic phototherapy patches. I'm telling you, I keep trying to put more tools in my toolkit to help the animals.
It's absolutely amazing. Now, nutrition. I just want to bring something to our listeners and something to you. How do you feel about feeding your animals people food?
Well, that depends on what we mean by feeding them people food, and I guess it depends also on what the people are eating. I'll tell you.
Good point. Table
Yeah.
scraps.
Well, when I got my first little Jack Russell Terrier when I was still down in Kentucky, and she was my co-pilot and my constant companion, and she would always want just a little taste of whatever I had for lunch, and sometimes I would only get lunch so that I could share it with her because, I often didn't take the time for myself. But I had to be careful what I got for lunch because sometimes I was eating something not so good that I won't say on the radio. And my little dog would look and she'd want a piece. And I'd look at what I was eating and I'd look at her and say, you can't have this. This isn't healthy for you. You can imagine how much my mother enjoyed hearing that I was eating things that I wouldn't give to my dog. That didn't really thrill my poor mother. She's still scratching her head. She loves me, but she doesn't always understand. So if we're eating good, healthy food, it's probably okay to share a bit with our dogs. Sadly, what most people mean when they're giving them people food is we give them scraps. And we may or may not be eating great, but even if we're eating great, we're not giving them the great part. We're often giving them, the fatty gristle or the parts that we don't want. And, a little tiny dab of that now and again, just to share our love with them, that's okay. But on the whole, we need to be careful what we're giving to our dogs, just like we need to be careful about what we're giving to ourselves.
My other little part Shih Tzu loves carrots and eats carrots all day long. Would eat them.
Terrific.
So, yeah. So, all right. So let's talk about these specialties. So, acupuncture. You are actually certified veterinary acupuncturist. So, where does that come in? When might you apply that methodology?
Gosh, now I apply it every single day with every single patient. And I learned acupuncture for the simple reason that I had seen an acupuncturist myself. I had some chronic back pain, and as a young horse vet, I was in my 30s. I didn't really have time for back pain. Thank you very much. And by luck, I found this human acupuncturist, and she helped my back pain. And as time passed, she was helping me with so many other health conditions. My overall health and energy and wellness was improving to such a dramatic degree that when I looked at my horse patients, I felt like I was deficient because I didn't have that skill to offer them as well. I wanted to share with them the benefits that I was getting. So I went down to a veterinary acupuncture school. The one I went to was down in Florida. It's called the Chi Institute. It's gotten quite well known at this point, but it started out very small back in 1998. I went there in 2006 for my certification program, and like I said, I use it on every single animal that I see: dog, horse, cow, bird, sheep, goat, you name it. Everybody's got acupuncture meridians, and everybody's got a way to access that energy.
And you also do chiropractics.
I do. My certification is technically in spinal manipulative therapy because there's some interesting rules and regulations about what we're allowed to call chiropractic, but it's the same thing. It's the same principles. And what that means is that I'm going to be moving all the bones and all the joints and all the body, trying to restore full and normal range of motion to all of those joints. And that can help in a variety of ways. It can help with some subtle lamenesses. It can help me to diagnose some not so subtle lamenesses, and it's going to help the neurology to work well as well, which means that all of the organs in the body are going to be working well.
Well, let's just picture this now. You, as a person, and you have a 1,100,000 pound horse. How in the world are you going to manipulate that horse? Do you have to stand up on hay bales?
My pat answer when people say, how do you adjust a horse, is very carefully, which which sounds silly, but it's true. Sometimes I'll be up on a hay bale, and that's certainly the way I was taught. Any of our listeners who've had a horse chiropractor or a veterinarian who does equine chiropractic or manual therapy come look at their horse. Probably most of them have seen them stand up on a hay bale or a straw bale, or maybe just a foam block that they've had kind of customized for them to stand on, and that helps. That can really help you with, seeing things from a different angle and getting a different viewpoint. I've trained myself to work all from the ground. It's just personal preference. I'm not sure. Some of my friends have some concern for my longevity with my own joints because of what I'm doing. But right now I'm 53 and I'm still able to do it. So I do it all from the ground. And it's really all about understanding the anatomy and understanding which direction the normal joint is going to move in. And if you line everything up just right, it doesn't take all that much force to restore that normal mobility.
Well, I have a jumper mare, and she had some issues with her neck area, her cervical area, and now she's, she would get normal chiropractic. She's down South Jersey, and she would just really appreciate it also, and you could see how she would be so released and she would feel so much better and her performance would be so much better. But you could tell initially, just, the trainer, I love him to death, Hugo Heska. Hugo would get on her, and just within moments, within seconds, he could tell whether she was out of alignment or she needed an adjustment. But it's so valuable. What you do, Heather, is just amazing, because I guess personally, I've always been, I'm a little bit older than you, but I've been involved with horses my whole life. But I've also, long time ago, I read a book called Eat to Win. And he was the sports nutritionist for some of the major athletes, Martina Navratilova, the tennis player. It's all about, I think, the total concept for my own personal health. That's why I have Macaulay come on and talk to us about giving us tips for the human body, because sometimes as horse people, we don't always take care of ourselves. Fast forward, I love how you've taken this whole concept of the whole approach and your hands-on approach to helping the animal. You don't find too many people, you may, but traditional medicine usually. So you are looking outside the box, but you're validating this through scientific research, through scientific experience, through your own practice. But I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you being willing to learn, willing to go out there and get certified and be a front runner. You're a front runner in a lot of this. So we do appreciate that. And before I let you go, I want to spend a little bit of time on what we talked about is the PEMF. Okay, this is the device, the Beamer device. You have a Beamer device. I have a people Beamer device and a horse Beamer device. And you have one also. So if you can spend a minute or two and just share how critical blood flow is, because the Beamer helps with blood flow, if not more. But for right now, let's just talk a little bit about blood flow.
Sure. Well, PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, is a growing area, and Beamer is at the forefront of that technology. As far as I'm concerned, it's my favorite PEMF device, and it's the only one that I'll recommend, and it's the only one that I'll use. It's so gentle. And so easy to use. And what it does on a basic level is it catalyzes a reaction that tells the body to open up the blood vessels, and then it gives that that pulsed current that tells the blood vessels also to rhythmically contract. And so now we've got healthy blood flow getting to the tissues. When people think about blood vessels, they think about the ones they can see. On the horse, you'll see, blood vessels maybe in their face sometimes if they're out running, and you'll see your vet maybe access the jugular vein to draw blood or to give some medicine. But those are just the big vessels. That's not really where the rubber meets the road. The rubber meets the road in the tissue, where these microscopic vessels that are just one blood cell thick are exchanging oxygen and nutrients and picking up all of the byproducts of metabolism and carrying them away. And when we maximize that microscopic blood flow, we're going to maximize the health of all the tissues, whether we're talking about liver function or we're talking about musculoskeletal function. Everything's going to work better when it has healthy microvascular blood flow.
Well said. And thank you for that explanation for our listeners, because it is so important, like you said, at that cellular level. And with not only us as humans, but for all of our animals, our horse people. I am so excited that you joined me today as our guest. I would like, before we part, let's tell our listeners how they get in touch with you. And I'm sure you have a website, if you wouldn't mind sharing that information.
I'd love to. You're going to laugh at me because I told you how I feel about technology. I'm still trying to make friends with it. My website is under construction. It will soon be up at o'learyvet.com. That's OLEARYVET.com, but it's not there yet. Meanwhile, you can call me or text me on my cell, which is 845-399-9844, or you can email me. And my email address is drheather@TessaLooVet.com, and that's drheather@TessaLooVet.com. I didn't get to tell you about Tessa, but
well, I wanted to ask
that's
you.
a story
We have
for
time.
3 more podcasts.
TessaLoo. It has to be somebody it's named after.
She was a horse. She was a very, very, very special horse. Animals have always been my best teachers. I learn best from animals. And Tessa, man, she's still teaching me. She had to pass over the Rainbow Bridge, sadly, but I learned so much from her. And she was really a role model for me. I don't know if any of our listeners have ever had a horse like that. Often we feel like we're teaching them and caring for them, and we are. But sometimes we come across a horse who's just smarter than we are. And if we sit back and listen, we might learn a thing or two. And that horse, she had volumes to teach me. So I had to name my practice after her. I promised her before I even went solo. I said, if I ever have my own practice, I'm naming it after you. And my animals always have lots of nicknames. And Tessa, when she was sweet, her nickname was TessaLoo. And so that's why I'm called that funny name. She had other nicknames when she was feeling a little more spicy. She was, after all, a thoroughbred mare.
I was going to ask you what breed she was. Thoroughbred mare.
Yeah, she was a thoroughbred mare. Hey, I love thoroughbred mares and Jack Russell Terriers. That tells you I don't really like an easy life, do I?
No, no, definitely. Those Jack Russells, they need a lot of attention, and they're smart, so smart. I had one also. And they're very busy dogs.
Very, very busy, and they're smarter than most of the people that they live with, and I include myself in that.
Well, I just want to tell you thank you. I wish we had more time today, but we can do this again. And Dr. Heather O'Leary, you've been a fabulous guest, and TessaLoo Veterinary Services. We've got to get your website up and going. I know how that is, too. I have my website. It's equineappraiser.net. That's my horse appraisal business, Signet. And I struggled, same thing, for many. I had it up and up, but, you got to keep the content live. So finally, I recruited my son, and I said, you know how to do this. Please help. And he did. So mine is up too, the new one, and excited about making those changes. But it's not always easy when life is busy taking care of animals. But I really love your approach, as I said earlier, and I want to thank you so much for being with me today. Guess what? We're going to be able to share this podcast with other listeners as well if you missed it live, but we will be able to grab it at equineappraiser.net. Dr. Heather, do you want to leave our listeners with anything else before we go?
I guess what I want to say is, times are always tough. The challenges are specific right now, but be kind to yourself and be kind to your horse and be kind to your animals. And, maybe just sit and listen a bit more. I know I always benefit when I listen a bit more to my animals, and I always come back a smarter, kinder, and more compassionate human. And I think that's what we're all here for.
Well, I think that's great advice. And hey, once again, thank you for being with us. Hey, if you have an idea for a podcast or you'd like to be a guest, horsesatwarwick.net. That's horsesatwarwick.net. You've been listening to Horse Sense Radio, and keep horsing around. It just makes sense.